We are here with Bullets to Bedpans, but I'm flying solo. MZ has some engagements that's not allowing her to be here, and I'm sad, but I will move on. So typically, we have a podcast that is geared towards the perspective of the medical person, whether that be military medicine or civilian. We always are looking for their perspective, right? That's our goal. But today we decided to do something a little bit different. We want to change a perspective because it actually is just really interesting, and it gives us as medical caregivers like an inside look on what or how we're being looked at and how we're being viewed. And I know we know some of that, but it's kind of neat to talk to somebody that's been in various roles and actually kind of close to the medical team. And so, oh, I'm coughing. Hold tight. And so I am bringing on actually a very kind soul and a new friend of mine, Chris MacLellan. Did I say your last name right?
You did good, MacLellan,
MacLellan,
Mac. It's okay.
potato.
Potato.
We got it all.
So
So, Chris, I know. Let me tell you a little bit about Chris. So, Chris and I met indirectly and then directly through our parent podcast, Coming Home Well, and Coming Home Well became a partner with Whole Care Network. And the
yes,
person that runs Whole Care Network is the one and only Chris MacLellan. Saying it right this time. How are you, Chris?
I'm just happy to be here because I've been an avid listener, and I thought, oh goodness, how can I get on this awesome podcast? And here we're doing it.
I have to laugh. So let me tell the backstory of this, and then we'll talk a little bit. The backstory was okay. So I kind of set you guys up that Coming Home Well has a network of podcasts. Whole Care Network has a network of podcasts that is geared towards caregivers. And so Coming Home Well says, hey, that's a great link for us. And we partnered, right? So Coming
Yep,
Home Well and Whole Care Network, we're like brother and sister now.
that's right.
And
Mhm.
we cross podcasts. We both have radio streams now. We cross radio stream. We cross all of that. Well, when this started, our executive director, Cindy, says, hey, so Chris wants to pick a couple podcasts and bring them over to Whole Care Network. And I said, oh, great. And I joked, and we had just started Bullets to Bedpans. And I said, well, we know which one he's not going to pick because when I had met Chris, and I know you guys can't see him, but he looked very proper, including a bow tie and glasses. And he has this amazing beard, and the mustache is actually a little handlebar mustache, and he's styling, right? And he just looked proper and he speaks proper. And I thought, oh, he's kind of straight up. He is not going to want Bullets to Bedpans. And I said, we know he won't want that. And so he goes, yeah. He's not going to want that until he wanted it. And he
That
says,
was the first one I asked.
he said, I want that one. So I found out that Chris has a little sassy side to him.
Well, when you have four older sisters, you have to have a little sassy side to you. So
You do have a little
yeah.
sassy side. So, okay. So we're doing this at a different angle. So I kind of want to explain to people again, like we are coming from an aspect of ourselves most of the time. We want to know what the medical person is thinking. We want to know how they're feeling. We want to know how they're coping. But in this aspect, you're not medical. Technically, you're not medical. You're not licensed. You're not a nurse. You're not
No.
a doctor. You're not a respiratory therapist. You're none of that. But what you are is a caregiver, and you did what was the clinical rotation you did or the opportunity that you had
I did a year worth of pastoral education in hospice,
in
and
hospice?
that allowed me to really be in touch with the medical community from a variety of perspectives, whether it was in the trauma emergency room, or it was just sitting there talking with a nurse or a physician or an aide. I had this really great opportunity to get to talk to people to where they were relaxed and comfortable, and you can know a little bit more about the person, and you know their why. It's so important to know somebody's why. Why are you
Oh,
doing what you're doing? What has led you to the path of what your career, your goals? And I think that's been the one of my secret sauces, if I could say, is that I seem to be able to blend into situations easily and talk to people from diverse backgrounds and skills and use them in a sense to where I can understand them better and how I can communicate better. Because the one thing I think, in whether it's medical or whatever field that you're when a caring field that you're in, the one word that always sticks out to me is advocacy. And how do you be a better advocate, whether you're a nurse, a doctor, a caregiver, if you're in clergy or whatever, if you're dealing with somebody's health and wellness, how can you be the best advocate? And I think really the key there is knowing somebody's why. Why are you doing what you're doing?
so we're not going to talk about your caregiving quite yet because it's everything's going to roll. But you did this while you were a caregiver, before you were a caregiver,
Before I was a caregiver, this was a
before you were
part.
a
I
caregiver.
had spent some time in the seminary, and that was CP, clinical pastoral education. I couldn't remember the acronym CPE, and I chose hospice as uh, um, as my area for the CPE, and I loved it. It
And
was
what was your so set up the like what did you have to do, and while you were doing it, what were you experiencing? What were you watching?
So what you had to do, well, there was, oh goodness, now we're going 20 some odd years. And
Dig.
my hair's changed colors and places since then. But really the thing about CPE is being being on the front lines. It is making the calls with the chaplain, being involved in any of the emergencies, especially where I did the CPE. There was a trauma center, so anytime that you heard the code, if you were when you were on duty, you had to go right to the emergency room.
Were you located in a hospital?
I was located in a hospital. Yes, so
Oh,
there
okay.
was a hospital, and then there was an inpatient hospice as well. But the one day a week it was in the hospital,
Oh.
and another day it was in the on patient, and then some days it was going to uh, senior living communities, that are in skilled nursing, that were in hospice. Wherever there was a hospice bed, there was a hospice chaplain.
H-
So
How many times did you find yourself? Because we know as what you were doing, you were there for family members, you were there for the patients, and being that pastoral support. How many times did you find yourself talking with the actual staff, the nurses, the doctors, the CNAs, the all them?
that was usually after the fact of an emergency or an event that had transpired, especially in the emergency room.
And what when you were interacting with them, did you notice any trends, or did you what was your takeaway as you worked with the medical staff?
Especially in the emergency room, one of the trends that I noticed, and that is I think I can describe this appropriately on a podcast. You know, uh, the staff, the pastoral staff, stood behind a partition with a glass window, and we could hear everything that was going on. We could watch everything that was going on. We could be there for uh, support for both the staff and the family and the patient. But what I noticed, there's three things. I noticed the dedication and teamwork that the medical staff had. I noticed the attention to detail from the patient being brought in from the emergency EMTs, transferring into the emergency room. But then I noticed, and I'm going to, this word probably isn't the right word to use, but I'm just going to use it anyway. The humor that came in the dialogue between the medical staff. Because, there's an instance, and I don't have this person's name, but I'll the situation that has always stuck out to me when the helicopter came. We got it's kind of like I think I'm in ER the way this was all going. The siren for the helicopter came in. We knew we had to go down to the emergency room, and they brought this fellow in. He'd been in a biking accident, and you look at him, and well, I don't know. I'm not a medical person, but I didn't see a scratch on him at all. But these people, the medical staff, they're just working feverishly with him. They're putting the oxygen on. They're taking the vitals. It's what's going on with this guy? And then they started talking about the head trauma. And then I started looking at all the photos behind the partition that of situations that the staff has had to deal with. And then I kind of put the two and two together as I watched how they were treating the love, care, and commitment that they were treating to this perfect stranger that none of them knew, but they knew this person was in danger. And then I looked at these pictures of all the people and they didn't any revealing of faces but it's like that memory of all the people that they've helped. And then I watched as this person right before my eyes continued to swell. The swelling just continued and they're starting to incubate the person, and they're putting it looked like these rafts that you would take to the pool.
Mass
That,
pants. Yep.
and they were there. I mean, it was amazing how in sync all this was for this particular patient, that they didn't know from Adam, but they knew that this person was in danger.
Mm-hmm.
And as I watched this unfold, and then going out and dealing with dealing is not the right word, interacting with the family and trying to convey to them what was going on, my words to them were, your loved one is in good hands. They will take care of him to the best of their ability, and they'll be out to tell you what's going on. But I want to assure you that he is in good hands. And what I've always taken from that experience is, again, coming back to your why. Why are these folks working in the emergency room in the most traumatic situation that you could never imagine? Now, this is going back 25 years ago, and you think of all the things that have happened in society since then, all the trauma that comes into hospitals and what nurses and medical professional people deal with. How do you do it? It's always intrigued me when I had the opportunity to talk to the medical profession, people in the trenches. And I know you're gonna get this. It's just to a person, it's my calling. It's what I feel like I'm supposed to do. I don't know how much longer I can do it, but I'm doing it now until I can't do it. And I think that it kind of comes full circle as it relates to how we care about one another. We all, I'm a firm believer in life that people need three things. They want to give it and they want to receive it. Mm-hmm. Love, care, and commitment. It sounds kind of corny, but when you think about it, and as I watch the medical personnel, the love, care, they were doing it. And they were providing love, care, and commitment by their skill set to that person. And whether that person was cognizant enough to know what was happening. I think we all have that intuitive thought process in our mind that we know that we know when we're being cared for, and we know when we're not being cared for.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just something that's intuitive to all of us.
You mentioned something I want to kind of go back to. You said you notice their humor.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's hilarious. Well, it's not hilarious, but it's interesting you picked up on that because hence this whole podcast, right? Like you've
Right.
listened to it.
I'm right. I mean, that's the secret sauce of your podcast, by the
It
way.
is the secret sauce, right?
Mm.
And when people um hear it, I kind of, I tell my mom she doesn't have to listen to all of them. Because
Hi,
my
mom. Hi, mom.
mom, like she been on it one time, like,
Mm.
but the tame ones, I'm like, you should listen to that, mom. But the other ones, I'm like, listen to that one. Um, because it is how we decompress, right? And so I'm curious when you first saw the humor, like in that situation. So that was a blunt trauma situation to
Mm-hmm.
you. The person looked fine until he didn't. He started to look like a Stay Puff. And then
Right.
you're like, what the heck? Right. So that was massive blunt trauma with swelling
Mm-hmm.
and they had to handle that because eventually he could like do crazy things like tamponade or,
Yeah.
Art would
Stuff
stop
that I
feeding.
wouldn't have a clue. I'm just,
Hey,
yeah.
things would happen. So the humor part, was that
Right.
going on in there?
The humor part, yeah, you could hear the humor part was going on, yet it was serious. You could also know that if there's a differentiation between humor and seriousness and
Mhm.
how they can be sliced together. That was right happening right before our eyes.
What'd you think
Yeah,
of it when you heard it?
I understood that to be a coping mechanism.
You already kind of got that.
I got that.
It can
Mhm.
be jarring for people to hear some of the comments. And honestly,
Right, right.
it's not the reason why you get people out of the room that don't need to be there because you need the room and you got a motor
Exactly. It
but
wouldn't have been appropriate for instance, it wouldn't be appropriate for a family member to have been in.
no, no. I mean, for them to hear something like that, they would be like, what the hell is going
Yeah.
on here?
Well, it was like, it's like, I, and I don't remember like this would be the exact comment, but it'd be like, well, why didn't the effing idiot have his helmet on?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what were you thinking?
What were you thinking?
Yeah.
What were you thinking? But we know we're going to help you.
Yeah.
So, and you, oh God, that gives me a whole other situation that happened personally, but I'll take that up a little bit later. But it, it, it really speaks to how people deal with difficult situations in their personal and professional life. And
Mm-hmm.
humor, that old saying, humor is the best medicine. Well, it's often true, but we also know that some people just aren't cut out for humor.
No. And timing,
Timing is
timing is every.
everything.
Okay.
Timing is everything.
Here's a side story. So my son's two is second grade. And we taught our kids because my husband was paramedic and I was a nurse. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of dark humor and we taught our kids humor can diffuse a lot of arguments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes when we're
Yes.
frustrated, we'll just, you'll hear, my husband crack something or I'll, come up with some witty little comment. Anyways, son's in second grade, go to the parent teacher conference and the teacher says, oh, your son, he's definitely he has some pretty witty comments. And so we're kind of, it's our oldest, right? We don't know
Mm-hmm.
anything. We're like little peacocks, like, well, we believe that humor diffuses a lot of situations. And she goes, timing's also very important.
Yeah. 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 It's yeah, because
Totally deflated us.
and you have to, and these folks in the trauma center, they're
Yeah.
experienced enough to know
For the
when
most part, I have been
yeah.
guilty of, making the comment at the table and looking up, realizing none of my medical or military buddies are there going, wah, wah, wah. That one did it. That was not.
That would didn't. But can I digress just a second? Tell you another
Sure. We
experience
knew we were going
where yeah.
to.
So this is 10 years ago. So Richard's been gone 10 years. We'll get to him in a second. But
Yes.
I I had experienced my first episode of AFib 10 years ago,
Mm.
July of 2014. And it's like, oh my God, I think my heart's beating out of my body. I need to go to the effing hospital.
Now.
So
Yeah.
I called the emergency. I called so bad. I called the ambulance. I get into the emergency room and they put me in just by chance, I'm in the same area that Richard was in.
Oh,
And I thought, oh, this is like deja vu. But
yeah.
I was explaining what was going on. They do the blood test. They do the
EKG.
EKG. They uh, blood pressure, all
Mm-hmm.
that, and they're not being very attentive. What
Yeah.
I'm thinking because I'm stressed. And
Yeah.
then there's this person to the next to me, and I hear the nurse says, "If you don't behave, I'm going to start giving you charcoal." And I thought,
Oh,
charcoal? What the hell is charcoal? And then I thought, oh, well, and then why aren't they coming back to me? They took the blood work, and so by the time the blood work came back, I finally asked the person. She said, "Well, what is charcoal?" Is well, the charcoal is if they're on drugs or alcohol, mostly
mm-hmm.
drugs. That this is what, and it tastes horrible, but this is what calms them down. I said, "Ooh, I don't want any of that." And she said, "Well, you don't need any because you don't have any alcohol in your body."
Right. It
And
absorbs the, yeah.
right, and immediately once they got the blood test back, they were all over. The medical personnel were all over.
You.
Maybe they were waiting to see because they had asked
Yeah.
me.
They need
They had asked
answers
me,
first.
yeah, they had asked me, "Have you been drinking any alcohol?" And I said, "Well, no. Is this been self-inflicted?" And I said, "Well, no, I've been drinking iced tea." And I learned from that experience that it's like, the charcoal. I don't want any of that. Well, you don't need any charcoal because they were waiting to see if this was self-inflicted
Yeah. If you had done some kind of medication or something that might have
medication.
induced the
Yeah,
AFib or, yeah,
yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah. It's like it
I,
was another learning experience.
I
So,
used to tell when I worked the floor, I used to tell the patients when we'd get really hopping, right? I
mhm.
would stick my head in and I'd be, okay, listen, if I am not in your room like all the time, it's because you are the best of everybody else. But if you need me, here is the call bell, step right out, just holler my name, like I answer. But if I can't be there, it's because you are actually in the best situation. Now, if it changes, we will change and play musical patience. But right now, you're in the best spot.
And
And
that's actually comforting for a patient to hear.
yeah,
And unfortunately, not enough patients hear that.
yeah. Cause I don't know. I've just always been able to kind of like, what would I feel like? And
Mhm. Yeah. What do I? Yeah. The
you
roles
know,
reverse.
in this day and time, I've had to have my dad in the hospital a couple times with influenza once, and he gets what I'm putting together. He gets like asthma, so cold induced asthma. So when he gets a cold, it actually triggers asthma and it constricts his airway.
Hmm.
And so I, you know, threw him in the hospital a couple times, and I didn't leave his side. I was in there the whole time, and I'll tell you, I saw I see a difference. And I've been with him a couple times. So one was for that, and one he had a total hip replacement. And I remember the first time the nurses were very young. I don't have anything against that. Like we
Hmm.
all got to
Well,
learn.
we're all young at one time,
Yeah.
and we're all
eh,
new at something at one time.
We're still
So
young
we're
in our
still
mind and heart.
absolutely,
That's right.
absolutely.
And so I remember that one of them was very focused on my dad's bladder. We got to empty his bladder out, but wasn't paying attention to. He's in a coughing fit right now. And if anybody's ever had a catheter placed, a Foley catheter,
God,
it's uncomfortable when you're not
it does
coughing.
not tickle.
It doesn't tickle, right? So you can imagine coughing, and she's trying to put this Foley in, and So I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. And so long story short, she got the charge nurse. Charge nurse kind of like, yeah, that's not a good idea. And they did nebulizer and whatnot. But the youngness, right? The newness there. And I was like, wow. And but a lot, but heavily, right?
Mhm.
And then scroll ahead and my dad needed this hip replacement. They did typically didn't keep him overnight, but they did because of his age, and he was 3 hours from home. And I was like, hey, help me out here. And they're like, okay, just to get pain control handles, and then I could, take them. No problem. I went in. I was supposed to go out to dinner with my aunt and uncle that night. I was like, hey, I'm just going to run up, see dad, make sure he's got some food, and I'll be on, I'll meet you. I never made it to dinner.
Mm.
They didn't have the staffing to even set him up for dinner. There was nobody around. And so I just had a test. I hit the call bell,
Mhm.
and it was 20 minutes before I saw movement.
Yeah.
And the lunch lady or the dinner person brought in the food, but she's just dropping this stuff
She's
off.
just she's just she's just
Yes.
an aide. She's not qualified to
And
do
my
anything.
dad was in pain, and the position that he was in, I wasn't sure if that was a position they wanted him there. Like I didn't know the nuances of post hip surgery, so I wasn't going to go play with stuff. 20 minutes, and it was not because they're just sitting around. There was nobody at the nurse's station the whole night. And
Mhm.
so I stayed, made sure he was situated. They did come in. I go, can I adjust the bed? Yes. Okay. We adjust it, made sure he could eat, set him up, cleared his plate, made sure he was ready to go to. I mean, I didn't leave there till 9 o'clock at night. No stuff, nothing there. We're
Mhm.
in a new era right now, post COVID,
Yes.
between two things, COVID, and then the boomers are retired and retiring. And if
Mhm.
there's any boomers left that are still nursing or doctoring or any of that, there a lot less of
But-
them. Like,
Right.
and COVID took care of a bunch, whether
Yeah.
they said, I'm done, or COVID said, you're done. One of the two, they went out
There's
the door.
there's that humor in the
I know.
bullets to bed pad. I
There it
just love it.
is.
I just
I
love it. So
know. And so, yeah, like now we're skinny. I tell people all the time, I'm like, go eat your wheat germ and go exercise and stay out of the hospital. Like, you do
yeah,
not want to
you
be
don't
there.
go in the hospital.
Is it because they suck? No, it is not because they're suck, because they're very educated and they're very smart, and they are not octopuses. They only have two hands. They only have so much time, and they're working four four RNs, and they'll have like 10, 12 LPNs. That's what they're doing now. Do
Yeah.
LPNs suck? No, they do not suck.
Mm.
But what people can do at their level, it puts more pressure upward, right?
No,
So,
it's kind of like home health care. You've got the
yes.
non-medical and you've got the medical. There's you can't expect the non-medical people to be able to do what the medical people can.
Right. And so it's this whole, like, they said, I just read a study, I don't remember how long ago, maybe 6, 7 months ago. I was doing a little nerdy research, and they said, and I don't even remember where it was at, but by 2030, they are expecting the nurses to be 500,000 short, 500,000 nurses short nationwide.
That is a big, big problem.
Staggering. It's a huge problem. It's a huge,
Mhm.
and that's just nurses. That's across the board, that mental health got ravaged by it, right? So they are struggling. There's not enough of them, and we're banging our forks on the table. We need more, we need more. And it's like, well, what do you want us to do? And you don't want to get in a situation where you're like, oh, you're breathing, you can be a therapist, you can be a nurse. Come on. What you want either, because
Come on in.
come on. Yeah, like, so
That
it's
two
a,
for one special. If you're breathing, you
oh
get
my, BOGO for everyone. Yeah, like, jeez. So I kept
Bogo for
asking the doctor, because my parents actually had hip replacements 4 weeks apart. I kid you not. My mom had her hip replacement. Then they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. And then my dad had his hip replacement.
I hope they got
And
bows on their new hips.
told him, I'm like, do we need BOGO for this? Like, or a wedding anniversary discount or something like that? The doc laughed. He was like, no. All right.
But you
But
know that short. Oh goodness, I think you know where the shortings in nursing
the
that you
shortage,
mentioned.
nursing
Shortage
shortage.
in nurses.
Yeah.
That's my. I think my mustache is getting away in my tongue. Um, that's where caregivers really can play such a vital role in the medical field.
You rolled into that perfectly.
Yeah.
See, you're talented.
Yeah, well, I've
Well, let's talk
been
about
doing that.
that.
Well, just you think about it. Caregivers are really what I like to say the CEO, the chief everything officer. They're the eyes and ears to the medical team that the medical team is, their medical team's not around 24/7. It's kind of like, in again, it's just, I know we haven't talked more about, but I'm going to give you another Richard story where, we've dealing with the esophagus cancer, going to the oncologist, and we're sitting there. He's talking to the doctor, and he says, "Oh, I haven't felt so good in mine. This has been so good. Oh, thank you. The med's working fine." And I look at him and say, "Wait a minute. You haven't slept a full night in a month. You haven't eaten a full meal in a week." It's like, the caregivers are the eyes and ears for the medical
And
staff,
sometimes they become the experts.
and sometimes they become the experts. And
In
the
that condition,
in
and like
that particular condition,
I will tell you,
you know the patient better than the doctor will ever know,
yeah,
better than the nurse will ever know.
I agree. Then
the, the
and you learn that person, right? So that
right.
the condition to that person, like I remember when I did a pediatric rotation,
Oh
man, you didn't
my.
mess with some of those parents. They will run it down for you. They will tell you all the technical terminology and what happened and this and that and up
They'll
and down. And I'm
they
like,
know, because it comes back to those three
mm-hmm,
words: love, care, and commitment.
I have an
Now,
invested interest. Yeah.
yeah. So, on the caregiving side, and
Well,
I,
let's stop right there and talk
yeah.
about say your background in caregiving first.
Well, okay. So my background in caregiving is both personal and professional. So
Mm-hmm.
I've had numerous years in senior care, whether it's been at a social service agency or a senior ministry at a church. But my caregiving experience really comes from caring for my partner, Richard, who was diagnosed with esophageal cancer in 2010, 11, something like that. It's a, and eventually passed away in March of 2014 from esophageal cancer. And from that experience of him being diagnosed, even up to this day, I've stayed in the caregiving conversation as an advocate, as an author, as an educator, because I firmly believe, and this is one of my mottos, is that it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. Everybody has a care story of some sorts. You've talked a little bit just about your parents and the hip replacement. That's probably just minor compared to some of the other
I was
things that are
paying
going.
back my education. That's
You're
what I
paying
was
back
doing.
right. But caregiving is the one social issue that's out there that brings people together from a variety of backgrounds, because everybody wants to find that magic wand so that their loved one can be cared for properly.
Yeah.
That's why, for our story, we were fortunate. We had our story told in a 2014 Pulitzer Prize nominated caregiving story, In Sickness and Health, A Couple's Final Journey.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, our story was successful because people could put themselves in our shoes, dealing with the medical system, dealing with healthcare, dealing with the legal system, dealing with social service systems. The story just happened to be about two men, but people could put themselves in our predicaments because they've dealt with them before. And in most cases, uh, people who are coming into their role as a caregiver, they do it because of one of two things. It's either an untimely diagnosis, or it's an unfortunate accident. And suddenly you're thrust into this role of a caregiver with very little, if any, preparation. You've most likely have never dealt with the medical profession on this intimate of a level. You've not dealt with the legal profession as it relates to your advance directives, healthcare proxies, power of attorneys, the social work. You don't know where the resources are. You're then tying all that into the emotional component that goes on, because caregiving is an emotional experience. Then all of a sudden you're caring for somebody that you love, and I'll check that in just a second, because I know there's some people, wait a minute, I've got problems with my parents, I don't really care about, but we'll talk about family baggage in a second. These caregivers are all of a sudden thrust into this in roles that they have no idea.
Yeah.
And the important component, especially for somebody that's on the medical team, is to pay attention to the caregiver. It is to recognize that caregiver is there so that that medical professional can make the proper and correct diagnosis and get to the person, get to the core of the need of the care for both the caregiver and the care receiver. And if I could say one thing about, because we touched about it, about the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
I think the pandemic, if there was anything positive about it, is it shed a light on care, especially care at home and what caregivers do or don't do. And I get to use all my phrases today. So let me ask you this: if every caregiver in the United States today decided that they were going to go on strike and they
Mm.
were going to take their care receiver, their caregiver, the care receiver, their loved one, whatever you want to, and they take them to senior living center, or they take them to an emergency room or an urgent care, and they just drop them off for the day. Said, you know what, I'm effing done with this today, I need a break. What would happen to the American healthcare system?
It crashed. Oh,
It would
by the way, you
crash.
get to swear on this podcast. Don't
I
worry about
thought
it.
so, but I wanted to,
Oh no, yeah, you don't
I
have
am
to. You can
polite
say
because
fuck.
I was trained well. I have 4 older sisters, so I
I
wanted to make sure.
know,
Yeah,
but you're
but
saucy like us.
I do. That's why I fit right in. So, uh, but that's what would happen. The
It
American
crash it.
health, it
Yeah.
would crash.
Hmm.
The caregivers are the backbone of the American healthcare system, and in most cases, caregivers are untrained.
Well,
You're fortunate in the sense that
yes.
you're you're medically trained,
Hmm.
but I'll ask you, when you're dealing with your family, with a family member, there's some emotional component to it that you probably don't have with a patient. I mean, I know
So
when yeah, it's just common. It's just common human instinct.
the
So,
stories are endless. I actually laugh because it's weird that we're having this conversation. It's not weird. It's just my life. It's serendipitous. But I write and I do a blog, and actually there's a couple thoughts here. So first, on the emotional part, somebody said this to me and it was like freaking profound when they said it. It was such a simple statement. They said, you know, people probably cannot relate to my situation, but they can relate to the emotion. And I was like, holy shit. Like,
mhm,
it explains so much. And especially in me, like, if people are talking about a situation, it pops in my head like, oh my gosh, yes, and then I'll tell a story, right? And, you know, it can be looked at as like, oh Lord, you got to one up everything. You got to tell your story. You got to, and, I try to keep that stuff at bay. But I realize it's because we're trying to connect to the emotion. Like, I can relate to your angst because I had a situation that, although it would have been completely different, I had the same angst. I could feel that
mhm.
because fear is fear, joy is joy, is
Joy.
excitement. We all know
It's
those
universal.
emotion
Yeah. Hmm.
across the board.
Right.
But how
Hmm.
we attain that, the fear, the depression, the anxiety, the joy, the whatever, completely different, right?
Right.
So all of us could have, I just think of like 100 people in a big circle could all have a completely different story, and that whole circle could be experiencing joy,
Exactly.
right?
And what's really great about that, all that 100 people, and they hear the story, they're all going to understand where that
Right.
person is coming from. And that's why,
Because of that joy.
it's
So
right.
that emotion part, right? So that's
Right.
that part. The other part, when you said when you're taking care of your family members, oh Lord. Okay, so that's a whole other ball game,
It's a
right?
whole other ball game.
And I remember when I had my first son. Now I'm a mom. Never been that before. That was a whole new ball game. And my son had jaundice. And that's pretty high. It's a pretty high level.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, probably for them, unfortunately, I delivered at a hospital I worked at. And the doctor's like, we have to admit him. His levels are really high. Okay, right. So there's a protocol we have, right? I know it. I
Mm-hmm.
worked right on that floor. I walked in the room and they're like, hey, they said we got to admit him. I have my baby with me. And I'm grabbing the paperwork. I'm grabbing the bassinet. I'm putting it and my nurse friends are like, let her go. Let her go. We can see her. Let her go. And so I'm like that. And when you have jaundice, you have these special lights, right? These special UV lights that you put over them to help break down the bilirubin. And we had 4 plus a blanket. And I took like 3 of them. I put 2 over, like it's like almost like a teepee, sort of like angled over. And then I put 1 over the top of both of those. And then I put them on a blanket, right? I grabbed all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if y'all have another jaundice baby, I will share. But if there's nobody, I'm taking all of it. And they're like, let her go, let her go. Went in the room. My mom was there. My husband was deployed. Looks at this. She's like, what in the world is this? I'm like, I got this. Right. Nurse mode in
The nurse
action.
mode. Mm-hmm.
And I am like, I got this set up and I've got everything situated. And then he messed his diaper. And at that moment, my mommy side and my nurse side went all for shit. I mean, like they all combined
They collided.
all at once. And I got extremely overwhelmed. And my mom said, I watched you trying to feed him because I knew he has to eat so he can poop, right? Because that's what gets this out
Oh,
and pee. You know, I got to get all this out. So I'm like, I got to feed him, but his diaper's a mess. I got to change that because I got to change him and I got to get him into the warmer.
right.
And for some reason, I felt like I had to do all of that in 3 seconds. So what it
Right.
looked like was me literally one-handed trying to feed him, one-handed trying to change a diaper. And my mom just looking, going, what a mess. And she's trying to help. And of course, I'm like not having it. I'm like, I got this.
Yeah, I got this. I got
And,
this.
and she couldn't get
I
to me to say, whoa, change the diaper, feed the baby.
now
Couldn't do it. So I that's a hard
it it it
place to
it,
be
it is a hard place to be, and I think just by you sharing that story, how many people are going to benefit? How many
and laugh
mothers are going to? Well, they're going to laugh, but again, it comes back to
and
that
relate.
laughter
Mm-hmm.
is the best medicine. They're going
Mm-hmm.
to be able to relate because I'm big into research. I like research. I like statistics. I like all of that. But the bottom line is, there's nothing really new you can say to a caregiver.
No.
The caregivers need 3 things: they need validation, they need resources, and they need respite. But you
Mm-hmm.
can't. There's nothing new you can tell a caregiver. You can have all these wonderful research projects, and those are good for statistics and funding. What Those are the 3 things every caregiver needs, and every caregiver comes back to those stories that they hear because they can place themselves in it. And from those stories, you often get the best trusted information and referral because one caregiver is never going to give a bad referral to another caregiver.
That let me tell you, here's a funny story about that. So my mom starting to go down the hip replacement journey has to find a provider and the insurance throws her this name and they said, okay, this person, right? And I'm like, okay. And the guy like was not panning out. Like I kid you not, he was telling us, like, I go, Mom, you need to ask him what they use to do the hip replacement. And it was one of them was like cobalt, and that's like outdated. Like people really try to stay away from that. They have, and it doesn't really matter. It was just one of those things. I was like, "Oh, I don't think that sounds right. Let me go check it out. Check it out." And they're like, "No." So then I said, "Mom, you need to talk to them about that." And the gentleman gets on the phone with her, and she asked again, like, "What is it that? What materials do you use?" And he goes, "Well, let me go look." And he goes in, apparently into the closet to see what's there that day. And now ortho doctors, and I admire a lot of them, they're bougie. Let me just tell you, they're prima donna and they're bougie. And I say that as a term of endearment
Mm-hmm.
because they are very specific on the stuff that they like, right? They
Right.
don't go in the closet to see what's there that day, right? So I'm like, no go, no go, not doing it, right? So we need to find someone else. Well, in the meantime, my mom said they sent her up to get a x-ray or something. And the rad tech up there was just up there for the day. She's a small town. So that, they
Mm-hmm.
have people rotate in and out. Was just up there doing it for the day. Happened to work at the same facility that this doctor that went and looked in the closet worked at. And I said, "Did you ask her about this person?" "Yeah, I did." And I go, "What was her response?" And she said, "Well, she didn't really say anything. She just went, 'Oh, yeah, I work with him. I've worked with him before. I work in the same area as him.'" And that was the end of it. I went, "Yeah, you're not going." And she goes, "But she didn't say anything bad." I'm like, "She didn't say anything good."
Good. Mm-hmm.
Because you can't come out, it's slander. You can't do it because
Right.
that you could get a lot of trouble,
Very much so.
but you don't have to say anything at all, right? And so, anyways, I said, "No, that I'm telling you, no go." So we find the second doctor. Oh my lord, the reviews were just pouring out. Like, "Oh, he's amazing, and I'd let him do work on me anytime." And when they got the care done, when they had the surgery and stuff, he was very communicative. Both times calls me, comes out of the OR, calls me, "Hey, we're good. Went well, yada yada. Here's what we do." The staff raved over him. They loved working for him. My parents both recovered within a month, right? Communication. He didn't do
Communication.
anything crazy, communicated with me. He treated me like the caregiver, and he acknowledged that I was a nurse and had a couple brain cells in the medical world and talked to me as such. And we collaborated on things and whatever. And their care was amazing. So I'm going to roll this over here to you caregiving.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're engaging with this medical team differently. You're not
Right.
pastoral care anymore. You're a different caregiver. You're
Right.
the
I'm a different.
personal caregiver.
I'm a personal caregiver. I'm an emotional caregiver.
So now what does this all look like when you're now working with the medical team? What was your experience?
Well, my experience, at least I had some experience in as a social worker
Mhm.
and as a lay minister of how to interact. So I always approached it from the aspect of respect. That's just kind of my motif. But knowing that if I'm going to be a good advocate, I have to go in there and be able to ask the questions that need to be asked and get the answers so that we can make the proper care. And I think what and that's very theoretical in one sense, um, but what you don't recognize where you're in the middle of it when it's somebody that you really love and care for. And I truly loved and cared for the person that was entrusted in my care.
Yeah.
Um, being cognizant of the fact that I was the co-pilot in his care. He was, it was his body. He was the one going through the treatments. He was the one taking the radiation, the chemo. And I needed to be able to convey to the medical team what his needs and wants were. even if they were different than mine. Uh, and and that's hard because the phrase that I like to use is, I learned early on that my caregiving cape is limited. I can't just snap my fingers and make something happen. But if I don't get a call back from the doctor's office within a timely period, especially as emotion, if it's an emergency, then it's okay to call back, and it's okay to call back and say, well, I called you yesterday at 3 o'clock, and I know it's at the end of the day, but we're 24 hours past. You have to have that ability to be able to
Advocate.
just advocate
Mm-hmm.
with the that delicate balance of being proactive rather than being reactive. If you're calling somebody on the phone and screaming at them, uh, is not going to, no matter what you could be being eaten by an alligator, but if you're calling somebody and screaming at them, why the fuck are why it says, you're not going to get, people aren't
No.
going to pay, not going to pay attention to.
So would it be fair to say that you made a cognizant effort to build that relationship
I
with your
made a
care team?
cognizant, right, and I have to also say that being an LGBT couple,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it even more important to build those strong relationships and to know that the team that you're working with, that they want to be a part of your team.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to have bigotry at its worst moment veil itself when you're in the midst of an emergency. And unfortunately for folks in the LGBT community, that happens all too often, where you're dealing with a professional, a medical professional, and that really doesn't want to be involved in your case. And you know what? I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah.
I need to know that up front.
Right. The values are different.
I
So
need
let's,
I, I need to know that up front. So if I'm in an emergency, that I can expect the professionalism
yeah.
without a worry about being discriminated. And you could read the story, you could see the two issues of discrimination that came up with us in a hospital setting. And, marriage equality, that levels the playing field, legal playing field
Oh,
in
yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
stuff, but it doesn't remove somebody's own personal bigotry.
And the stigma, right?
Right. And the stigma. So, that's why it's so, to be proactive about your care as best as you can, but mindful that it's going to be an emotional experience. You're not going to see things that somebody who sees your care partner every other week or once a month might see, like the care, like a physician, like a nurse.
That's a
And
good point right there, though. Like, we're not seeing the everyday and you're not seeing the nuances. And I have a friend that's battling multiple myeloma, very
mhm,
aggressive cancer. And he's so funny. He's like, his wife is like, well, I mean, she's very an expert in this, right? And so when they walk in the door, they're like, "Oh, look out. His wife's here. Like she's gonna be asking the questions, you know." And
mhm.
but they respect her for doing the research and for being aware and wanting to know more. And as soon as you ask, and I think if there's anything I get across to the civilian community, it is okay to ask
It's
questions.
uh,
Because if you don't, you just said it. They
you
see you once every 6 months.
right.
In acute situations, they'll see you and then they might see you a week later and then 2 weeks later and then a month later and they're still not
They
seeing
still
you.
right. A doctor said to me many years ago, he said, the best patient, the patient that I want to have, are the patients that ask me questions, and the
Yes.
patients that are true advocates. And here's another example of why, especially for seniors, why it's so important to have an advocate. On one of our um, last trips to the hospital. Um, you know, it's like, how does this happen? How come hospitals are, and this is going back 10, 12 years. How come
Mhm.
hospitals in the same system don't share records? What's up with that? I know,
Mm.
understand HIPAA and all that stuff. And I think some of that's been rectified, but here we are in a different hospital in the same hospital system, and the doctor on staff for this at this on this ward, he looks at me and he says, "Well, the only thing that's wrong with him is, his, it's been 10 years since he's had heart valve replacement. He just needs to go down to the main hospital and have open heart surgery and have his valves replaced." And
Like, no big deal.
I just looked at him and said, "You know what? He has esophageal cancer,
That'd be
and
bad.
and have you ever even looked at the record? See, he's not going for any type of open heart surgery. But if Richard had been by himself
Right.
and that doctor had walked into the room and said that to him, he'd have signed on the dotted line
Oh, yeah.
because the doctor knows best.
The doctor knows best. There's a cultural part there, like a
It's a cultural
generational.
part.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. A certain
yeah. I think
generation.
that's changing, but it really comes back to the whole role of the caregiver as being the advocate, the co-pilot, the one that is there.
And we're also a little guilty as patients to just say, "Oh, no, that's fine," because
I don't want to
I
be a
re
burden. I don't want to be a
yeah,
burden.
you kinda wanna be, or you
Yeah,
really don't think things are that bad.
I
Like,
think that's that bad.
I got a call one time. For some weird reason, my liver enzymes had shot up. I was like, "Dang, I wasn't even doing shots or anything." But, they were up and unexplained, like, and so they called me like, "You need to come in right away." And I was like, "Okay." Went in and they're asking me questions and like something about sleep came up. And actually this is before we got the lab values back, but I had gone in because I just didn't feel good. I was just kind of feeling off and stuff. I'm working, I have 2 kids, my husband deploys. I mean, to me, I'm like, well, no wonder I'm tired. But I felt a little more tired than normal. So, anyways, I went in and my husband just happened to go with me. And they said, like, how's your sleep? I'm like, oh, it's been really good. He goes, yeah, if you consider 4 hours a night good, sure. But said that. Just looked out. I'm like, how dare you? You know
Yeah,
me. But he wasn't wrong either.
wasn't
Like,
wrong either.
I mean, I'm fine. I'm awake,
I'm
aren't
good.
I?
I'm okay.
So I must be
Yeah,
okay. We kind of
I'm okay. Yeah.
minimize
We minimize.
ourselves and
Right.
minimize the situation. Yeah, we do. We're
Yeah.
human. We don't want to be a burden, all those fun things. So let me ask this question before we kind of wrap it up. Um, so as you went through this with Richard, right?
Mhm.
That's a lot of care, a lot of um repetitive care, right? So anybody that's had
Right.
cancer is seeing the same people over and
Same.
over,
Right.
weekly, monthly. I mean, they literally, there's your world, right? It is
Mhm.
at a hospital at some level. You build relationships,
Where you
right?
right. It is a true relationship building experience.
You build relationships, you build almost a new family, right? When uh Richard passed away, it's already hard enough to just have the loss of him. But did you feel like you lost kind of part of your family? Like the medical care community?
Right. You're a couple of things happens after your care partner, your loved one dies. Your identity goes with that person.
Mhm.
You've spent all this time caring for them, and you've been involved in all these different appointments, and you've gained, you've developed relationships with staff and professionals, and they make you, for the most part, make you feel like you're there, and then all of a sudden it ends. And also what ends is the relationship. So it's kind of like losing two relationships in one. All of
Mm.
us, then that and there's no, just as there's no rhyme or reason when caregiving starts, there's no rhyme or reason when it ends, and that's the another common aspect of it. There's always a beginning and there's always an end, and we're always never prepared for either one of these.
Mhm.
And each, and that old cliche is true. Time does heal all wounds. Wounds heal in their own time, but they heal in your time. And it takes people a different time to get beyond. Some people, they snap right at, yeah, I'm going on, to this next thing, and it's great. Some people, it lingers. Um, I've had my roller coaster experience up and down, but I've stayed in as an advocate because I recognize that, again, I'm coming back to my motto: sharing the story helps people cope with their experience over and above what other medical calamity that they've had. They know that they can talk to somebody or listen to somebody that's been in the trenches, that understands what it's like losing a loved one, or understands what it's like dealing with a medical professional that, you're do I say all these big words right? Or, what, are they going to think less of me? And my words to them is just explain it to them in your own way. Don't ever hesitate not to say something. And get a great relationship with your pharmacist.
Mhm.
They're the ones that stir the drink. They're the one
Literally.
that, uh, and all of this happens in due time and in your comfort zone. And that's something I also think it's important to mention also. Well, there's two things I want to mention. Um, I know through my experience that, I was fortunate to care for somebody that I truly loved. I know there's tons and tons of caregivers out there that feel like they're a caregiver by default, or that they feel like they have to take care of, their parents or their siblings, people that they've had a baggage with over the years. And I certainly respect that.
Mhm.
But when it comes time for care, I hope people can, with those conflicts, can leave that baggage at the door and resolve those after the fact, and just center on, those folks that need the care, because in the long run, uh, you'll feel better for it. And then
Mhm.
I kind of like to leave you with this thought. Um, I was I I miss him dearly. Even after 10 years, I would love for him to be here, but not the way he was the last 6, 8 months. But I learned something here, especially in the last couple of years, about care, that I never would have known until I was in need of a caregiver, when I had my, heart procedure, my ablation,
Mhm.
and I needed help getting in and out of the shower. I needed somebody to fix my meals for me. I needed help making my bed or getting in and out of the chair. It really put me in touch with, and I can only speak for Richard and I. It really only put me in touch with Richard's psyche, about how difficult it must have been for him to be losing all of the the common things that he did in life on his own.
Mhm.
How difficult that must have been to ask for help on some mundane tasks um, that we're used to doing on a regular basis. It was through that experience of me needing care that I really got in touch with how hard it is for people who are in the midst of a health calamity, with the thought of not only their, uh, inability to do common things, put on your socks, but the mortality aspect of it.
Mm.
I will always be sensitive to, when I listen to a caregiver, they talk about their frustrations with their care partner. They're not doing this. Because I had the best advice for Richard. I was like, I had the best. Why isn't he following this advice today? I mean, I've read all the books. I've done it.
It's like
You know,
parenting.
right?
Why aren't you
You
listening to
Yeah.
me?
Why aren't you listening to me? Well, because I was never inside his body dealing with
Exactly.
the loss of everyday common things we do, that we kind of take for granted.
Sometimes we resist just to have control,
Exactly.
right?
Mhm.
Resistance is a form of control. So
It is very
trust
good.
me, I got 2 teens.
Yeah,
They're
well,
really good at that.
yeah.
What Let me ask this last question. What wisdom would you impart on all caregivers, professional caregivers? What would you impart on them? Maybe I'd rather focus on the professional caregivers, our nurses, our doctors, our CNAs, our support staff, all of them, every
Actually, yeah,
interaction.
it'd be in every interaction. Actually, this is going to be two pronged. In every interaction, um, I would just be present to that person and let them tell their story. And I would also encourage, especially any professional, to tell a little bit about your why, so that that person knows why you're doing what you're doing, because that's going to comfort them. Why did you become a nurse? Why are you doing this? Thank you for helping my loved one.
Mhm.
And then across the board, whether it's the caregiver, the professional, or the whatever, I and this is one of my longstanding mottos that I needed to practice myself. Set a daily intention for yourself, whether it's 5 minutes a day of me time, just sitting in a closet, or going outside, just whatever you do best for yourself. Set a daily intention for yourself and be present to you, so that you can be present to others who been entrusted to their care. That across the board is so critical. Is take that, if I can go back 10 or 12 years to that experience in the emergency room, I would go up to the staff and I would say, I would like to say, go take 5 minutes, go get a cup of coffee, just sit with yourself.
The sassy side of me says, and just for my professional audience, it does not mean grab your cigarette and donut and go sit out.
I'll
Do
take the
something
donut, but not the
constructive,
cigarette. But yeah, just
constructive
yeah,
outside.
yes. All right, just set that daily intention for
Right.
yourself. It sounds kind of corny. Um, five minutes more in the shower. Let that hot water run down, knowing that's all for you.
I think we don't, um, we're learning that. And I'm hoping these new generations that are coming into healthcare are learning it. There's been some small changes. Like there's been some rules that have been set with how interns and residents, how many hours they can do per week. It was a rite of passage to overwork them, essentially.
Yeah, it was kind of
That
like
you survived
it
your,
was kind of like a hazing.
yeah, it really,
Mhm.
and what did that
What did
do?
that serve? What purpose did that serve?
Yeah, like I stick my head in the room to the resident and I say, "Hey, I have a preterm labor patient here," and she
But
tells me to,
I haven't slept in 3 days. Do
"Oh,
you want that person helping you?
she tells me to go start pitocin." And I went, "Pitocin is what makes you have a baby, that, by the way." And I said,
I wouldn't know that for sure.
"How, how, uh, how awake are you?" I could hear her go, "Wait, what?" And I turn the light on and I go, "Okay, Christine, sit up and look at me." And then I tell her again, and she went, "What did I say?" I'm like, "You told me to start pit." Holy crap. We're there for each other. You know what I
We're
mean?
there for
So
each other.
I want people to understand that this community is very short staffed right now. We need to get away from the stereotypes. You hear that stereotype, nurses eating their own. I pray that these new generations coming in are collaborative. There's a there is a educator. I guess she's also considered an influencer, but her Instagram is Nurse Meg. She's been on our podcast and she's awesome. And that is what I want to see the next generations look like, for the professional caregivers to
Yeah.
collaborate, to bring them together and to educate. Because she sees that. She says, "Oh my God, COVID just ripped it apart."
Right.
And now we have the young teaching the young, and that is not where we want to be. And so we have to come together and support each other.
And and that's the exact spirit of the friendship and the relationship that Coming Home Well and the Whole Care Network has built together,
Yes.
because there's no silos in either one of our programs. It's all about
God,
collaboration.
no. I mean, I think Helen's been on our show. We had a
Yeah.
grand old time. We're actually going to do
I told
another
I told her
podcast together.
and I told her I'm going to be on Bullets to Bedpan. She was jealous. I said, okay, so good. But no, this is not only are you awesome,
Very kind.
the message that you're bringing to your listeners is so valuable.
Yeah, and I just hope we're honoring it in a good way. I mean, we want people to engage and to feel comfortable and to take a breath and lower their shoulders and have a laugh at the dark humor
Mm-hmm.
and take the extra 5 minutes in the shower and get back to it, because that right there is it's critical.
Very much so.
We can't have our healthcare system fail us. I
No,
mean, and I mean
and
on the
it's
technical level.
teetering, and it's
It
teetering.
is teetering, and
Mm-hmm.
it's teetering on a lot of levels, and we can't have it on
Mm-hmm.
the boots on the ground level. We've
Mm-hmm.
got to have that foundation right there, because
Mm-hmm.
if the top crumbles and the foundation's still there, at least there's still a foundation. But if the
Yeah,
foundation goes, everything goes.
everything goes for sure.
And so this podcast really is to honor all of those that are there. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, okay, this is what I tell people. This is not the podcast to listen to get your CEUs and
See,
be all professional. This is kind of like your
this
break
is
room talk with a little polish to it. Not
a
much,
little,
but a little polish
well,
to it.
just a little, just a
We bring
little.
some resources. We
That's
want you
right.
to
It's
do
all about.
better. Yeah, we're not here to vent and be mad and gossip. Although I did have somebody actually tell me on Instagram, I said, "Oh, thanks for following. Hope you like the podcast." And took a listen to it and comes back and says, "So this is just essentially a podcast on like venting about your issues." And I went, "Oh, ooh, ouchie." And he's like, "Well, I didn't mean it like that." I said, "Well, we can resolve that. Why don't you come on a podcast?" And we're bringing him on. He's willing. He's a very nice person, but
Yeah,
he's going to come on and talk about it because he has his own story
he's got his own story. Mm-hmm.
and hilarious. When he said that, he's like, "Oh, I didn't mean it that way." I'm like, "Too late."
Too late. You got it, because he's gonna. It's gonna be all revealed.
That's right. It's all going to come out, so it's all
Yeah,
good.
good
All right,
stuff.
Mr. Chris.
Donna, you're pretty awesome.
I think you are incredible. Really, I
I'm
was so
sure. I'm so
excited.
glad our lives have crossed paths. This is awesome. So
Me too. You have to thank the little mastermind back there that never wants to pop out and be noticed. But I mention her like on everything. But
yeah,
that's our executive director, Cindy. And I tell people
we're going to get
on
her on a secret podcast. She just doesn't know it.
I know I've talked to her about it. She says she
We'll,
immediately
we'll,
starts
we'll,
sweating thinking
we'll
about
work.
it.
We'll work together on that. You and I will work together
Okay,
on that.
we're gonna do that.
Yeah, we'll just.
She's listening now, and she's gonna be like, "Oh Lord."
she's gonna be on to us. But thank you so much for this
You are
opportunity.
very welcome. Very welcome. And so, all right, everybody, it's Bullets to Bedpans again, solo girl, but no less awesome of a podcast because I was here with Chris. And we really, really thank all of you guys for listening. We want you guys to share. You're going to see stuff on our social media asking questions. Answer the questions. We want to know. We
Yeah,
want to
go for it. We
engage.
want to know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we love talking. I mean, look what we do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, share, smash the button, all that good stuff. And from all of us here, you guys have an awesome week. Peace out.